All wings report in.
HouseDog, standing by.
Mother Goose, standing by.
Lowtech Tuck, standing by.
Lock S foils in attack position. Animal Squadron ready for battle.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Animal Squadron podcast. You are here with your hairiest host, Mother Goose.
And Lowtech Tuck.
And once again, our good friend, Setherton.
That is, in fact, what my name has been. So happy to be here with you guys. It's been a very long time since I've been called Setherton, seeing as how I've not produced content under that name for the past 2 years, just about. So.
Everyone else may have forgotten, but I remember.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
What's your name now?
It's just Seth. I'm really not doing anything right now at the moment. I've got a lot of stuff in the works. I got a lot of stuff under development, but I have not done any branded stuff since that one video I made.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before Adobe kicked me off of their creative suite.
Yeah. Well, so last time you were on, we got to talk about kind of like your Star Wars journey, some of your likes, some of your dislikes. But
yeah,
what have you been watching lately? What Star Wars content have you been consuming?
So the Star Wars stuff that I've been consuming, I've seen the Ahsoka show, the
Nice.
new series that was written and directed by Dave Filoni. I've watched Visions.
Okay.
Over again. I watched it when it originally came out, but I decided to go in and watch it in the original Japanese dub.
Is that season one?
That is season one. I haven't seen
Okay.
season two. Sorry,
Okay.
I don't have
Okay.
that much to
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
add to my repertoire. But I mean, watching Visions in Japanese totally elevated that experience for me.
Yeah.
I thought it was all right in English, but when I watched it in Japanese, it was like a switch turned on in my brain where it's like, oh yeah, I'm watching anime.
Yeah.
And that kind of has like a different sort of feel to it that just made it feel way more impressive to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just quick question. On our last episode, we talked a lot about like Thrawn and stuff. How did you think they
Right.
did with Thrawn in Ahsoka?
Right. Yeah, we totally did. Like that last episode was mostly like looking forward ahead to the Ahsoka show, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Dave Filoni's movie.
Yeah, right. I thought the Ahsoka show had some really good parts, some stuff that I really, really want to see more of. And there were just some parts that I wouldn't say there was anything that I actively disliked in it, but there were some parts where it was like, okay, maybe we could have done another story pass on this episode and just tried to like punch it up a little bit, try to make it a little more interesting, try to think about this show as its own thing rather than just a prequel to another thing. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of what it felt like by the end of it for me. It kind of really felt like, okay, they're really just giving us the setup. This is the opening crawl of Dave Filoni's movie. And if his movie has an opening crawl, I can totally see it just being like a 3-sentence sum up
Recap.
of the Ahsoka show.
Yeah.
I enjoyed a lot of it. I loved Sabine's whole thing, especially in that there was are we allowed spoilers here?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think
Okay.
we
Oh yeah.
I think we've finished our putting out all our episodes. So yeah.
Cool. There was, especially once Sabine started to have like conflicting motives going on with her, that's when she really kind of took off for me. And I was interested to begin with because, I like Rebels. It's the same character that I've seen, but there was the scene with her and Balin where he just kind of crawls inside her heart and takes it for a spin. And it was honestly some of the best Star Wars I've seen recently was that one scene where she's trying to stop him and he offers to let her come with them. And it kind of really elevated both of those characters for me. I think Balin was definitely my favorite part of the show.
Yeah.
He was the most interesting. They gave us just enough that we kind of knew what was going on with him, but not enough that like it gave away everything that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
Ray, I'm blanking on his last name, but the guy who played
Stevenson, I believe.
Yeah, Ray Stevenson just has this presence on screen where you can't help but like think about him whenever he's even in the scene. And what is he doing here? What does he want? How is he going to go about doing it? His whole disillusionment with both the Sith and the Jedi thing was one of the most nuanced character motives that I've seen in Star Wars in general.
Yeah.
His whole, he kind of plays into Snoke's line about darkness rises and light to meet it, but he sees it more as this is a never-ending cycle that's causing untold pain to countless beings throughout the universe, and we need to figure out how to not be in this. It's not just enough for the light to triumph over the dark. We need there to not be light and dark anymore. Mm-hmm. Because even though, light always wins, but still there's a war going on.
And
that's
people are
hurting people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I read his character. And that just was so interesting. And the fact that it didn't like push him to become just this evil dude. Like many of the Sith are just evil guys. They're just like they'll kick a kid if given the opportunity.
Yeah. In fact, not even they'll search out the kid.
Yeah, right. They'll just casually snap the kid's neck as they walk by for dramatic flair.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see, like, this guy is an antagonist for sure. He's definitely against the heroes, but it's not because of anything having to do with the heroes specifically.
Yeah.
They just have different goals that happen to put them at odds with each other. And I kind of watching that, I kind of felt like he would totally let Ezra and Sabine and Ahsoka just go off and do their own thing if it didn't conflict with what he was currently doing.
Yeah, for sure.
He was totally willing to just like and the fact that he honored his agreement with Sabine. He wasn't even like, now we've got you. You've fallen into my trap. You are far too trusting. Like it was... He actually like brought her in and ordered that she not be harmed, and then gave her a little dog wolf creature to ride on to go find Ezra. It was and it was only after he was ordered by Thrawn afterwards to hunt them that he actually did.
Right,
then he left and stopped hunting them.
Yeah, which I think Balin is a really good just example of kind of what we're going to be talking about today, which is the Chosen One prophecy and the balance within the Force. So kind of getting into that, I'm just going to read us off the actual like new canon prophecy, which we recently got, I believe, last year with the Master and Apprentice novel. Right. Master and Apprentice being in reference to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet. But the prophecy says, "Only through sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless. The danger of the past is not past, but sleeps in an egg. When the egg cracks, it will threaten the galaxy entire. When the Force itself sickens, past and future must split and combine. A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him ultimate balance in the Force be restored."
Wow. That is way longer than the one that I read, which was mostly just the last 3 sentences of that.
Right. Tucker, what are your thoughts on this?
So, if you look at Star Wars chronologically throughout the time, the Force has been sick for a long time, and actually, I'm just going to start us off hot in saying that I think the Force has attempted several times to fulfill the prophecy, to balance itself.
Yeah.
And Anakin is actually like a line of Force users that are supposed to be the chosen one to balance the Force.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
Do you
I like that take.
do you have like is that just a theory, or do you have any like examples of previous Jedi and or Sith potentially?
A very easy example would be Revan, for instance.
Oh
That
yeah.
would be one. Especially with light turning to dark, then turning to light, and fighting and defeating many Sith and Jedi that are
Right.
problematic in order to fix the Force. I mean, that's one way that he attempted to. I mean, he's still not the chosen one. Anakin's the only one who I can really say actually finishes it. But you have people like that. You have Exar Kun would be one that attempted to. He attempted to be the chosen one, but just wasn't.
Yeah.
You have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other ones that attempted to do the same thing, but just couldn't. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's all I have for now.
Well, no, I
just
think
say
those
that,
are
yeah.
really good examples.
Yeah, I think that you're onto something there, and I've actually written many a Reddit wall of text about that very thing. Is that I think that you're totally on the money there. That the idea of this prophecy and the chosen one, it doesn't necessarily apply to one specific individual, but
Yeah.
rather this kind of hope as prophecy. Like the prophecy is kind of like an expression of hope that someone will eventually bring balance to the Force.
Yeah.
And that like Anakin certainly was one of the bringers of balance in that case. I would argue that whether or not it worked for audience members, it's definitely seemed to be the intention of the of Lucasfilm with Rise of Skywalker that Rey also be a quote unquote chosen one.
Yeah.
With the line that Anakin says, bring balance, Rey, like I did. Like whether or not that landed for you, I think that it's definitely clear that they intended Rey to also kind of be taking that mantle that was previously Anakin's.
Yeah.
Well, I think before maybe we get too deep into like how the prophecy was brought about and like if balance was, if the chosen one actually did what they were supposed to, let's spend just a few minutes talking about what balance in the Force actually means, because this is something that's heavily debated in the Star Wars community.
Right. This is the part where one of us will wake up with egg on our door.
Probably.
Yeah, I will just say what the old school Jedi believe.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to throw that opinion out there, is that they believe that they are the balance in the Force.
Right.
And so if you're not Jedi, you shouldn't be, is kind of what they think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
And then there's a whole nother like a lot of times I think Americans, and we've talked about this on the podcast a little bit, but we view like balance from a very like Western perspective, where it's balance is good beating evil, kind of to go off what you were saying, Tuck. But then Star Wars is very inspired by Eastern influences, where we see the yin and yang, where light and darkness exist together in balance. So a lot of people believe that is what the balance should have been, was the dark side and light side existing in coexistence.
Yeah, and I would, and I totally know what you're talking about with like all the Eastern influences. The idea of the Jedi is a very Buddhist inspired philosophy of the emotional detachment of anyways, I kind of have gone through a sort of arc in my belief in what balance in the Force actually means.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, it was totally what Tuck just said about how, the Jedi beating the Sith, that is bringing balance. And then kind of as I went through my edgy teenager, I want to be the cool gray Jedi one phase, it was you have to be equal light and dark. And look, Anakin made it so that there were 2 Jedi and 2 Sith, plus all of the other ones that were eventually added to the canon.
Right.
And kind of as I've been going through, and I'm sure that this is not where I'll land eventually, but I kind of am kind of going a little bit back to the original light side is balance kind of thing. Because Elijah, you mentioned when we recorded our last episode, that the dark side is definitely present in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
But the light side isn't. Nobody ever mentions the light side. Nobody ever talks about, oh, you need to go back to the light side of the Force. It was just, you have the Force and you have its dark aspect.
Right, and that's the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. We actually, the first ever reference of the light side was in an EU novel, and the first, I think, canon reference is in the Clone Wars. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think you're right about that, because there was definitely, like, the Mortis arc came out before anything Disney did.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm kind of, and it's hard because Star Wars has so many different creators. So many people have made Star Wars.
Yeah.
There have been so many writers, so many people, and each one of them kind of imparts their own philosophy about this on it. So, like, you look at Mortis, and it's 100%, oh yeah, you need equal light and dark.
Right.
But you ask George Lucas about, like, after, because somebody asked him about it, after Phantom Menace came out, like, what does balance in the Force actually mean? And he gave the answer that it's just the Force minus the dark side. Like, yeah. And so I'm not trying to say, like, oh, George Lucas said this, so this is what it's definitely is, because, again, Star Wars is not George Lucas's anymore. It started out that way, but it's become, like, a bigger community project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and actually, if you guys don't mind if I jump off real quick, I'll just share my opinion as far as what balance is. And I think where the story goes in the first 6 movies is, I think the balance, like, yes, Anakin does bring balance to the Force, light and dark, yin and yang, all that good stuff. But in my opinion, I think that bringing balance to the Force was every bit as much about killing Sidious.
Yeah.
Because he was such a cancer on the Force and what it means and it existing in all human, I mean, in all beings. I mean, he was such a sickness, he needed to be killed. And that's what a lot of, I think, the balance came from. Is that he was too dangerous to be left alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Get it?
To use the Star Wars quote. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm glad Seth got it, because I didn't.
I think that's probably kind of where I land on it, is that it's not necessarily about good and evil or about the whatever. It's about like the Force itself not being well, so to speak. That the Force has been sick, I think one of you said earlier.
Yeah.
And that I would kind of go to, that's what the dark side is a corruption of the Force. That there's I would probably say that if you ask me, that the light side is not the opposite of the dark side. The light side is just the Force itself, and that the idea of the light side is that you are a servant of the Force and that the Force is working through you, whereas the dark side is you dominating the Force for your own motives. That's kind of how I would look at the difference between the two. It's not really that, oh, one side's evil, one side's good. It's more that in one side you are being a vessel for the Force to work its will through you, and in the other you're dominating it to your own will. Which would kind of tie into that, Sidious being a cancer on the Force, being he's bending the Force to his own will and using it to crush any opposition to himself. He needed to be removed for balance to be achieved, for the Force to work its own will through the galaxy.
Yeah, well, and just to throw something out, I mean, just a general thought to support what you just said. I mean, I just want to say that just because something is a protest doesn't mean it's an opposite.
Ooh,
Like, you know, the dark side is a protest to the
Right.
Force,
yeah.
but it's not necessarily the opposite. And yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think we're speaking the same language.
Yeah.
So I think one of the reason that there's a lot of confusion on this is because as much as I love George Lucas, I don't think he was set on what he wanted it to be, because Seth, you're completely right. He did talk about that the Force in that sense after the Phantom Menace, but during the production of the Clone Wars, he switched again back to the yin and yang.
Right.
Like I literally just watched an interview of a writer's room where he was telling everyone like how the Force works, and it was yin and yang, and it made me realize, I was like, I don't even think George Lucas knew exactly what the balance was.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was making movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
right.
I'm not trying to pick on the guy, but I mean, he was making movies, and I mean, and we're the ones who decided to get obsessed with him.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I don't think he ever intended anyone to be nearly as analytical as we have about it just in the past 10 minutes. And we haven't even like gone into it all that much.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is completely
yeah. It's like in his head, I'm sure, like when they were making the original trilogy, light and dark were just shorthand for good and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also,
know,
like, he probably just assumed, like, they'll get it.
Yeah, right.
They'll just get it.
We
It's
didn't
fine.
Very
get
much
it,
that
George.
kind of
We
storytelling.
didn't.
Suddenly all of like Yoda's little retorts to Luke in Empire start to make sense, because Luke is like, why? No, there is no why. Just do it.
Just do it, please. Please.
That's George writing to the fans. There is no why, just watch it.
I did also want to talk about. Sorry, a lot of this for our audience has just been us spitting out all of the different theories on the balance, because there's a stupid amount of them. The last one I can think of is the fact that, like, when you're just looking at what George Lucas created, you know, after Episode 3, there was 2 Sith, 2 Jedi, Sidious and Vader and Obi-Wan and Yoda, and then, or people think, well, Obi-Wan and Yoda failed, so instead it's Vader and Sidious and Luke and Leia, that there were these 2 super powerful Force dark side users, and so the Force balanced itself by creating Luke and Leia, which is actually, Tucker and I were talking about this a little before we started recording. There's an interview with Freddie Prinze Jr., who is Kanan in Rebels, for those of you who weren't sure, where he essentially says this exact thing, where balance is the fact that the Force created Luke and Leia to balance out these 2 dark side users. And I always really misunderstood his quote, because I was like, 2 and 2 is stupid. Like, that's not something you can achieve. Like, that you can't always have the exact number of Jedi and Sith, but that's not what
And also, like we talked about, the Sith never do. They never have just 2.
Yeah, right. And who would call that a victory in any sense of the word?
But I don't think that's what, like, after rewatching it, I don't think that's what he was saying. I think he was saying that, like, the numbers don't matter. It's just there were these 2 really powerful dark side users, and so the Force created 2 potential really powerful light side users, almost like we get in the sequel trilogy, the like dyads in the Force.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of find it interesting whenever somebody on Reddit like goes off on like why balance means equal light and dark, because if you watch if you experience the stories, the Force definitely has a light side bias.
Yeah.
In like what the Force itself chooses to do.
Yeah, well, and I mean, just put yourself in the Force's shoes. I mean, if you were the creator and ruler of a universe, would you rather deal with people who want to serve you or who want you to serve them?
Right.
Which one would you like better? If you were theoretically their Force divinity thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things where it's like, okay, you could talk about, equal light and dark being what balance is, but that's definitely not what the Force thinks it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Force will create equal light to oppose the dark, but I don't think the Force has ever in any story created equal dark to oppose the light.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
That's a really good point.
That is excellent. I like that.
So the next thing I want to bring up is I believe it's in episode 2, where Yoda mentions that perhaps they misread the prophecy. Like,
it's my favorite line in that whole movie.
Me too. What makes me laugh is the new canon prophecy. The first line is, "Only through sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless." Like, they had to know it was coming.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
This is part of. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I also kind of asked the question though, as far as like, while I think everyone can agree that Anakin actually accomplishes it. This is why, like, my earlier point though of in the Jedi's mind especially, but also in the Sith's mind probably too, there's been several, because there's been 4 Jedi purges.
Yeah, I think
at this point in Star Wars.
I know for sure in Star Wars. I'm not entirely sure if they're all like now like still official Disney canon.
Oh yeah, like the first 3, I guess. But I mean, but 2 of them. We have at least 2 of them.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
we've got the Kylo Ren's and Darth Vader's purges.
Yeah, exactly. So either way, is there a new chosen one every time in their mind?
Ooh.
Or is there just one?
Okay.
And he hasn't come yet.
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards.
Like, was everyone, I mean, not to get super religious here, but like, was everyone before just a prophet and now we have the Messiah? Or have there been several Messiahs?
Yeah.
Is kind of my question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been leaning towards more and more recently, is that it's less about this, like, the prophecy was less about a foretelling of specific events and more of just a exposition on the nature of destiny.
Yeah.
So to speak. That it's not like it's talking about I don't think anybody like sat down and saw Anakin throwing Sidious down a reactor shaft.
Yeah.
I think it's more of like somebody was so in tune with the Force that they gained enlightenment about the nature of the Force itself, and gave this prophecy about, well, it has to come to balance.
Yeah. There will be a purge, a sickness, and a redemption every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in that case, you can look at it like, okay, Anakin was a chosen one, Luke was a chosen one, Rey was a chosen one. The chosen one specifically is an odd way of calling them, because it makes it sound like something had like the will to specifically select a specific individual. And even when you read the prophecy, it's not clear who's doing the choosing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say Anakin's the only one that I think you could argue was actually chosen by the Force.
Right.
And I'm only saying that because he was created by the Force.
Yeah.
Right.
That would be my only argument.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically he was created by Sidious in an attempt to manipulate the prophecy.
So,
yeah.
I know what you're talking about, and that's something that's been really misinterpreted as well.
Oh, is it?
I'm actually a Plagueis created Anakin guy also. I'm just going to throw that out there.
So,
I think it was both of them leaning over that bowl from that Yoda episode of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
You get the whole like Sidious thing from a comic where Vader essentially like has this, what people misinterpreted as visions of his past for more like how he views his life. So in this, we see...
It was there was no father...
Right. There was...
comic panel, yeah.
And, like, we see, like, Sidious kind of, like, creating Vader. But in all actuality, this was just how Anakin viewed his life, because he's realized he's been a slave his entire life. He was never really free, and it was all part of Sidious's plan. But... I mean, I could definitely be wrong on this, but I think it was more so Plagueis started to be able to manipulate life, and the Force created Anakin in response to that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because what I'm saying, because we do know that Plagueis could create life. Sidious says that in Episode 3. That's canon. Plagueis can create life. We know that.
You just can't sustain it.
He can't bring them back.
Right. Yeah. Well, see, and that specific line, I've always held in my head that Sidious and Plagueis created Anakin.
Yeah,
even
I
before,
did too for a long
even
time.
before that comic came out. That comic's a more recent Disney
thing.
edition.
Yeah.
And
That's
so,
why I'm a Plagueis guy.
You're totally right that in that comic, that is not necessarily what it's saying. It's more, you're correct that it's more Anakin, seeing how he thinks of himself in physical terms. But from like the first time I ever saw Revenge of the Sith, the way that Palpatine does his whole, he could influence the midichlorians to create life. And he looks Anakin like dead in the eye.
Yep.
Like, to me, that always was like,
telling him.
That's how he got it. So
I think that's what George Lucas intended, and then Disney came in and changed it.
I see. Well, what are you going to do about that? Nothing. We can't.
I will probably cry in the shower a little bit, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I do normally, but I'll cry double tonight.
Yeah, that's easily the most rational response from any Star Wars fan.
Exactly. So, you guys were talking about, like, multiple chosen ones, and there's a featurette called The Skywalker Legacy, where J.J. Abrams himself clarifies that the balance in the Force is never permanent and has to be restored from time to time. So I think that's kind of his philosophy when he was making The Rise of Skywalker, that there will always be need to rebalance the Force over and over again.
Yeah, I kind of see that being the case too, because otherwise there's no free will in the galaxy, right? Because you can't guarantee that there will never be another Star War.
Yeah.
Because people exist and are people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of harkens back to many of the existing world creation myths that exist in our world, where it's just like everything was pretty okay, and then people came, and now you can't. Now everything's screwed up.
Right.
It's,
right.
Now you ate the apple. You broke the seal. Pandora's box. Everything. It's just, now that there are people, you have no choice but to try to use the people to fix things, even though it can never be a permanent solution.
Yeah. Tuck, how are you feeling?
I don't know. I'm really getting into that. I mean, just the whole prophecy thing. I think it's one of those things where I don't think we'll ever get an answer, to tell you the truth. I think the way that Star Wars works is they'll never just give us a straight up anything. But I really enjoy exploring all these options personally.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I will say, as far as my personal opinion, is, I mean, I agree that there have been multiple that tried to bring balance to the Force.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my earlier point was more that, like, I really think that Anakin's the only one I can think of that actually accomplishes that.
Yeah.
Like, I have trouble with, and, granted, I am biased. I'm not a sequel fan. I mean, I'm just going to say that. But I have trouble with that Rey would be one too. I kind of more think, especially watching the movies, that that's something that was retroactively put onto her. Whereas Anakin, that was always his character's purpose.
Right. I think they weren't entirely sure how to, like, make the sequel trilogy feel like or episode 9 specifically, not just in the ending for its trilogy, but the ending for the whole saga as a whole. And so that was just kind of the easy answer. Just raise the chosen one the whole time. Yeah,
and and just to go along with that, it feels artificial to me. Is my point.
Yeah, there's a lot in Rise of Skywalker that feels like, okay, you guys are playing catch up here.
Yeah, it feels artificial in a lot of ways.
So
now, I'm also not here to hate on the sequels, but that's just my point.
You can look at the sequels and just say that the entire time with the sequels they were playing catch up, right?
Yeah,
because there was a lot of fan vitriol before the sequels came out about the prequels. And so Force Awakens come out having to prove that, yes, we can do good Star Wars movies. And then people were like, oh, it was too similar to A New Hope. So then Last Jedi comes out having to prove we can do new things with the Star Wars movies.
Yeah.
And then people didn't like it because it was too different or because they mishandled some of the characters. And then they had to be like, Rise of Skywalker, oh, crap, we have to end this story now.
Yeah, there's a really good YouTube video that goes exactly into that. It's called The Anti-Trilogy by So Uncivilized. It's like a
25-minute
video, definitely worth checking out. And that, I mean, it's exactly what you said. Just every movie was a reaction to something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, Seth, so Tucker and I, we haven't read the Rise of Skywalker novel. We don't have necessarily the most positive views on it, but I know you said in our last one that the Rise of Skywalker novel was really good and it changed your perspective on it. So specifically, like the Chosen One and the balance, was there anything from that novel that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, the fact that it didn't mention those at all. The Rise of Skywalker novel, one of the best things it did is it took away all of the stuff about destiny and legacy and Rey is the new chosen one, you're his granddaughter. Obviously she's still his granddaughter in the novel,
right? Yeah.
But it stopped being concerned with like Rey's place in the Force and started to be way more concerned with Rey's place in her peer group, in the Resistance, in the galaxy in general. What is she supposed to do? Let's assume we win this war. What's next for Rey? She just saw a vision of herself being evil. If she tries to go train more Jedi, is that actually how she's going to end up becoming evil? Like, it doesn't deal with any of the stuff that the fans talk about in terms of the Chosen One and the destiny and the light and the dark. And it does talk about light and dark, obviously. It's Star Wars. But
right.
One of the best things I think it did is that it really grounded the characters in what's going on right now. What are the conflicts that we're currently facing beyond just how do we bring balance? It's like, how do I feel like everybody is using me was kind of Rey's whole deal, was that like, I'm the only Jedi left, so I feel like I need to be doing things, but like the Resistance just sees me as the last Jedi.
Right.
The Ben is the only one who actually sees who I am for real. Mm-hmm. Everyone else just sees this version of me that they have in their head. Whether it's the First Order, whether it's Sidious himself, whether it's the Resistance. Even she even has these feelings about Leia, because Leia's like, don't ever be afraid of who you are, and she's like, but do you even know what that looks like, Leia?
Yeah.
Because Leia's her master. Leia has to kind of foist her expectations of what Rey needs to be on her in order to teach her. And so that, I think one of the best things they did was give Rey that they expanded on kind of the line from the trailer, which might be the best what might be the best line in the movie, about how everyone says that they know me, I'm afraid that nobody does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And kind of made that her whole deal in that movie was knowing who she was. And she kind of has an idea of who she is, but even she's not sure about that. But the only person who she feels actually sees her for who she is Ben. And it kind of ties into that why she would go to him so much.
Yeah.
I really wish we had more of that. I really wish that I got to see more of that.
That I think would have helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's the thing is that it makes the moment later when she does the admittedly stupid thing where she like crosses the streams, the lightsabers, and she says, I'm all the Jedi. And in the book, that takes on a new meaning about how she is the legacy of the Jedi. She still doesn't quite know who she is and what she's going to do, but she knows her place in terms of that destiny thing, that she is the only one who can do something about this right now.
Yeah, I like that a lot better than her, like, actually being all of the Jedi.
Actually being all of the Jedi.
And that actually makes the Chosen One thing, to me, actually mean something. Rather than just like a cheap line. Like,
like she just...
that makes me feel a lot better about people saying that about her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's it's less of like an actual thing about her and more of a role she's stepping into. I am now all of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So
And
I am going to be the one that opposes the darkness.
yeah. And I would say, like, instead of the chosen one, she's the last one.
Yeah.
They're equally important. I'm not trying to, like, but
Just different.
it seems to me that, yeah, they're just different. They're just different.
Yeah.
It's cool, though. Yeah. Very cool.
To kind of just keep us moving forward, I think we should talk about the father, the son, and the daughter, but not the ones you're thinking. Anakin, Luke, and Leia.
Ah.
Because there's a lot of debate. We've talked a lot about Anakin and him being the chosen one. I think we all pretty feel similarly about him fulfilling that role. But there's also been a lot of debate on Luke being the chosen one because he was the catalyst to bringing Anakin back to the light. But then there's also the rumored George Lucas sequel trilogy scripts where Leia was actually going to end up being revealed to be the chosen one in the end, which isn't canon, never happened, but I still think it's something interesting to talk about here.
Right.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
there was no chosen one in the original trilogy. There was no mention of that. There was no concept of there being a chosen one in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing I will say, in light of the first 6 movies, is that Anakin clearly is. I mean, I think that's safe to say. But especially too in light of some of the new Disney canon stuff, is he still is, because I mean he's the one that the father chooses. The Mortis God, the father, chooses.
Right.
He's the one that's shown that he's the chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so what I would say is, I mean, I think at this point it's kind of inarguable that he is.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I just thought it was something to bring up.
Yeah, and I would bring up that, like, Anakin's being chosen as the chosen one in the Mortis arc did seem a little bit have to do with more just the fact that he was the most powerful and less about, like, any actual thing having to do with destiny.
Yeah.
Because it was only, like, the reason that the father decided, yep, he's the chosen one, is just because Anakin was able to hold his kids in place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with you. Anakin is the chosen one. He is the named chosen one. We can talk about the role of the chosen one and how many people like rose to that role, but in terms of the actual named chosen one, it's definitely Anakin.
Yeah.
Which I really love the Ahsoka series and what we see Anakin as in the Ahsoka series. To me, I think we talked about this a little bit in our, I believe should have been our episode 5 episode, or part 5 episode, where we see Anakin in the World Between Worlds, and I think we should discuss the possibility that he has now become the new father, the balance in the Force. We see him as Anakin, we see him as Vader. There's a lot to get into here.
Yeah, that was actually how I had my my treatment on the sequel trilogy end.
Yeah?
I used to do a podcast with Caleb Garrison that was called Real Talk, fixing your favorite flawed blockbusters.
Yeah.
And we would do story treatments on movies that we saw as flawed and how we would have fixed them.
Yeah.
And this was like right after Rise of Skywalker came out, so there was a lot of hate in my heart.
Yeah.
For who I at the time called Jar Jar Abrams.
That is insulting. I love that. That's hilarious. Anyways, continue.
Anyways, yeah, that's a whole. My thoughts on Jar Jar are a whole other episode.
Oh yeah, I agree.
But I kind of wrote a treatment of the sequel trilogy using The Force Awakens as a baseline about where you could go after that. And the third movie was going to be Mortis Unleashed. That wasn't the name of it, but that was the idea of it, was that the son has turned Mortis into this like dark realm of his evilness. And since the father and the daughter are now dead, he has full reign over it. And there's no balance anymore. And he has found a way via the second movie. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but he has found a way to basically impose his dominion over the galaxy from Mortis.
Yeah.
Like he's found a way into our galaxy and is currently like setting up his empire, which will reign for millennia to come. And the ending that I had for that was that Ben Solo ends as the embodiment of the light in Mortis, and Rey ends as the embodiment of the dark.
Okay.
So there's kind of a role reversal from how they started out in the movies.
Yeah.
And this was like in the throes of the balance is equal light and dark.
Right.
You have to have dark. You have to have it. Before, started thinking more along the lines of darkness as a perversion rather than just one aspect of it.
Yeah.
But the idea was that Ben ends up as the embodiment of the light, Rey ends up as the embodiment of the dark, and Anakin as a Force ghost / world between worlds entity is the father who keeps them in balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my ending. Like if you had to rewrite the sequels, that was where they ended up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. In a previous episode, actually, I mentioned to Elijah that like Kylo / Ben wouldn't be a bad choice for a Mortis god, and I kind of agree with that. I mean, in a lot of ways, his story kind of reflects that as well.
Yeah,
being a chosen one of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that came my thing came from like it seemed like Kylo Ren was an inversion of Anakin from the prequels, where Anakin's whole thing is I'm growing up in the light, I'm tempted by the dark constantly. Ben's was I'm in the dark, but I keep getting tempted by that pesky light.
Yeah, but he's an imitator.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so my idea was like you can have the turn kind of mirror Anakin's turn in Revenge of the Sith.
It's very interesting. No, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Switching just a little bit here, and Elijah, I'm gonna kind of throw a wrench in your plans here, but I was just gonna ask a general question to you guys. Why does Mace Windu think he's the chosen one?
I think because he has an ego.
Mace Windu thinks he himself he himself is the chosen one.
So, like, long-time Star Wars lore has been that he hates Anakin because he thinks he is the chosen one.
Oh man, that tracks so well for his character.
Oh yeah, no, that's like as a longtime prequel boy, I can tell you for a fact that there have been several comic books, several books that mention that, and like even he goes so far as to like basically bully Anakin as a child, and like make him train harder than the other younglings. Like as a punishment. I made you
strong.
As a punishment. Yeah, exactly. Like it's messed up, man. But I was just throwing that out there. What do y'all think about that?
Oh man, sorry, I'm kind of reeling because that is such a great, like, a little fanon about the character, like a headcanon about it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think it's a really interesting thought.
Yeah.
Personally.
I really think it's just ego. I really like Mace Windu as a character, but I think that was one of his biggest downfalls. Is he was very egotistical in himself, but he was also very egotistical in like the Jedi Order and like their place in the galaxy. And I think he just wanted to be the one to actually bring the balance.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do not think the Sith could have returned without us knowing.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry, have you ever left the temple?
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, look at how, like, he and Dooku obviously hate each other, like, from Tales of the Jedi, and I think that's a big thing, is they both have very strong egos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one thing that makes them hate each other.
Right. Yeah.
Even whenever they were on the same side. They don't like each other at all. Yeah.
Yeah. A combination of the writing and Samuel L. Jackson's natural, like, charisma just made him the smarmiest bastard that's ever been.
Yeah, but it's perfect. It's perfect for the character. I love it.
You know,
and I'm fine with it, but
I think it also went to just like how naturally talented he was. I mean, he was second only to Yoda. Like he was definitely up there.
Yeah, and also like a long time goat.
Yeah,
like there's nobody else.
Yeah, wasn't it like Yoda was Grandmaster of the Order, but Mace was the Grandmaster of the Temple?
Yeah, so it's something along
something
those
like
lines.
that.
I mean, either
Like-
way, he was easily the right-hand man.
Yeah.
Like Yoda headed up all of the philosophical enlightenment stuff, and Mace headed up all of their martial applications or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like,
I
I
mean,
think no matter what, you could say Mace Windu's the head guardian. Like, he's the head of all
Yeah.
the guardians, for
yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
there's a reason that like Yoda went to go get the clones and Mace went to lead the Jedis on Geonosis.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's really interesting, like he thought he was the chosen one, because I always saw Mace Windu as like a perfect monolith of everything that was wrong with the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he still is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the cardinal sins of the Jedi Order was certainty that they were on the right side.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily of light and dark, but just like the Clone Wars even.
Yeah.
The certainty that they were always doing the right thing because they were the Jedi, and how could they do anything wrong? Is kind of one of the big fatal flaws of the Jedi. And Clone Wars, the series, really explored that a lot.
Yeah.
But I think having Mace be like so certain that he's the chosen one that it like causes him to need to bully a child who might be who might actually be the chosen one.
Right.
Yeah.
is like, it totally exemplifies that certainty that was the Jedi's downfall.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, and-
that really fits really well.
In fact, I'm pretty sure it's been a long time since I've read this book. I actually have it on my shelf, but I'm pretty sure it's in the novelization of Episode 3 that he actually, as a youngling, makes Anakin fight him. Like, it's a training thing.
I do believe that's the novelization of Episode 3. Best,
and he
best
full
Star
on just
Wars
like,
book, by the way.
and he full on like destroys him, and it's like Anakin's
Right.
like 12. It's horrible. Yeah.
That is the best Star Wars book, by the way.
And
to
also, I think he
anyone
taunts him
wondering.
too. I think he says like, "Some chosen one you are," or something like that. I mean, he says something that it's like, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if I'm not mistaken, that book, like right before Mace Windu's death, makes it clear that it was that self-assuredness that was Mace's downfall, because Mace has that, at least in that book and in other expanded universe books, that he has that Shatterpoint ability.
Yeah.
Where he can see the intersections of destiny where people make choices that affect the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
And he and it was his whole thing is like, I can tell when shit's going down, like I know where those shatter points are and how to exploit them. And then his last thoughts are, he was so obsessed with his ability to see them that he never even thought that Anakin's shatter point might be Palpatine.
Yeah, and then also too, I think in the novel too, doesn't he like, it cuts to him for a second, and he's holding his lightsaber at Palpatine, and he is confident that he and Anakin are about to destroy Palpatine together. Like, he's totally sure. Yeah.
100% sees himself as the Messiah here. This isn't, I'm in movie 3 of 6 right now, and I'm about to put an end to this. I am the savior of the galaxy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is more than just, this is more than just, I need to win this fight, I need to beat the Chancellor. This is the climax of the story for Mace Windu.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. But I will say, I like that. Like, just as far as character development of Anakin and how all this stuff needed to happen, Mace Windu's kind of the perfect antagonist as far as making Anakin turn out the way that he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So
everything
did
that
the
Mace
Force
does.
create Mace Windu for this purpose? It's getting crazy here, man.
The Force created Mace Windu to bully a child.
They also created Watto to yell at him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Well, so just kind of, we've got to talk a lot of different theories, a lot of different thoughts, our personal thoughts, just kind of like what maybe some of the fan debates are. I think just in summary, because the Chosen One is so, or prophecy is so like open, I was thinking maybe we could each just kind of give like our final interpretation of like what that is and what balance is to us because, you know, I think we have some similar thoughts and some different thoughts, and I think that'd be a good way to round this episode out.
Okay. Elijah, would you go first? Because I feel like you haven't gotten to talk like at all.
No, yeah. I definitely can.
Presiding over us, our chaos.
Yeah.
So for me, again, like Seth said earlier, I've really gone on a long journey on like what the balance is, and I think learning that they never mentioned the light side in the first 6 movies really opened my eyes a lot. And so I'm of the belief that there is the Force, and the Force is the proper, like, it is just how it should be. And I think the dark side is a sickness, but I also think the light side is also a sickness to the Force. When you go too far to the light, it's like
You become Mace Windu.
Yeah. Or even to the point of, like, in Yin and Yang, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a big reason that balance is so important is because obviously too much dark, you're doing evil things. Too much light, and you become inactive. You refuse to step up to the darkness, almost like you become too much of a pacifist, that you won't defend those in need. And that's where balance really comes in. And I think that's how I like to see the dark and the light, is in they're both perversions in their own way. The dark side more, of course, like I definitely see it as a sickness, and maybe the light is more of like a misunderstanding. And so I love the Chosen One prophecy, because the way it plays out to me is Anakin kills both sides.
Yeah, he does.
You cut to, like, I know they're gonna have to recast him because Ray Stevenson unfortunately passed away, but like the first movie opens with Balin holding Vader's charred helmet, and he's like, "Help me, this one guy I knew one time. I will finish what you started."
There's one guy I knew one time.
For sure.
Well, because he's not his grandson.
Yeah. And then I think it with Ahsoka, I really like the theory that Anakin has now stepped into that place as the balance within the Force. You know, he wasn't just Anakin. He was Anakin and Vader, and that's why I really like this idea of the two sides not necessarily being great either. It's supposed to be more in the middle.
Yeah, because he exists both as Anakin and as Vader in the War Between Worlds.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't just see Anakin; he also is Vader in the War Between Worlds.
Yeah, and the Force resides in all living things. I mean, that's something that the Jedi claim to believe, anyway. But I think is really true in the Star Wars
scientifically.
Yeah, right, but I think is how Star Wars works. I think the Force does reside in all living things.
I never thought about that before, but if with that, what you just said, Tuck, does like every normal person just exist in the balance? It's like the Force itself exists within them.
Yeah, I think so do the trees and frogs. I mean, like, as far as what the Jedi believe, like, what they're supposed to believe, excuse me. What Plo Koon believes is that like they all exist in harmony.
Yeah.
And that it all exists all around them and through them.
Yeah.
And what I would say, like, what balance is meant to be is it's meant to be all of them existing in harmony and as part of each other, because that's what the Force is. It's a binding force that binds everything together, and everyone is one, which is also, like, in our Plo Koon episode I talked about, like, I think not only when Plo Koon died that he didn't become an individual, but I don't even think he wanted to. I think for him, the greatest joy that could possibly happen to him was becoming part of the giant, all-inclusive Force. Like, I think that's what he wants.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
He did explode, so
yeah,
he is kind of everywhere now.
He did go everywhere, yes.
Remind me which is which, because there's the Cosmic Force and there's the Living Force. And I believe the Cosmic Force is like the all-encompassing force, and then the living force is like actual people and them interacting with. But I can't remember exactly how this plays out.
That is a topic for another episode.
You know what? I'm down. I'd be down.
There are whole books we could write about that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's basically just kind of a life and death thing. I mean, isn't that pretty much right, Seth? Like, the living force is alive things, whereas the cosmic force is dead things. Is kind of where it's at.
That's kind of how I've read it. I've also seen where it's like, the living force is the aspect of it that's created by living things, and the cosmic force is the thing that creates those living things.
Yeah.
And it's both. It's like two different ways of thinking about the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Where it's like the cosmic force is the progenitor of all things, and the living force is what is created by all living things, and it kind of goes in a cycle like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess like my point was just that the force is in all things, and it is all things,
for sure,
is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Right.
Well,
totally.
So, Tucker, you kind of bounced off what I was saying, but did you just kind of final thoughts? Did you have any other things you wanted to say about the balance, the force, the chosen one, the prophecy? What do you have for us?
I really like your yin and yang thing, man. I mean, I think that's pretty much what I think as well. You know, I mean, I'm going to be honest here. I think that the Sith, the reason that whenever they die, like, for instance, they can only haunt something. Like, they can only haunt an object or whatever. Like, I don't think that they are, and kind of like what Seth was saying too, I don't think that they necessarily are part of the Force as much as other beings, but I think that in order to become a Night Sister, become a Sith, you have to do enough evil things to where you kind of give that up. Like, you kind of give up a bit of your, I'm humanity. Only using this because it's an Earth word, but humanity. Yeah. Like, I mean, like, obviously an alien doesn't have humanity because they're not human, but you get my point. Yeah. I think the only reason they do that is because they have to give that up.
Yeah, I think that's supported by a lot of the the novels and stuff. I think in Revenge of the Sith, the reason that Palpatine sends Anakin to go kill all the Separatist leaders, more than just wanting them dead, the reason he specifically sent Anakin to do it was to help further cement Anakin's fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it also the Jedi, but like I think he's in Palpatine's mind in that book, the actual reason he's sending Anakin is that, like, with every death, Anakin's humanity is dying with it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, he already did the hardest thing, and that was killing people he loves, but also to get him to fully, cement where he's at, he has to also kill people he hates.
Yeah.
Right.
And to give into
that hatred.
Yeah.
And not only just giving into his hatred, he was told he was doing the right thing. Like, he was ending this 3-year-long war by killing these Separatist leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anakin, oh my gosh, I just realized this. Anakin never learned that General Grievous was dead, did he?
Oh.
He didn't know the war was over.
Right. By that point,
actually, and Palpatine may have played it like that. I will say the only thing in the novelization is actually just, this is slightly off topic, but if you haven't, just read that one part, because it is kind of sick how much, like, trash Anakin's talking while he's killing the Separatist leaders. It's like,
I know exactly what you're
dude. Like, he's about. Like, he goes dark, like, really fast. Yeah.
Which,
like, he wanted to kill each and every one of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, one reason I really like, to just bounce back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, one reason I really like the yin and yang, and that Anakin killed the Jedi and the Sith, I like this view of the prophecy because it's not saying in the future we can't have Jedi or Sith anymore. It's just saying, like, the current existence of these two orders were both causing imbalance, and he killed them. The Jedi were serving the Senate instead of the Force, and I genuinely believe the rule of two also was causing imbalance. Like, they were purposely forcing the dark side into this little bubble of two people, except for their secret apprentices. they were trying to control that
And
aspect
any
of it
Jedi who stubs their
totally.
toe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, going forward past episode 6, the Jedi should be more focused on the Force, and the Sith, we kind of get to see this opened up with, like, the Knights of Ren, and, like, Ren himself, and I know Kylo, we had Snoke, Palpatine, they're all dark side users, and I believe the like normal knights still had some, they weren't like Sith, but they still had some connection to the dark side. So it opened that door for more people to have access to it, when before it was just such a closed off system.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and actually, if like just while we're talking about this, I think it's relevant to one just thought I had as well, as far as the yin and yang thing. Talking earlier about how the Sith and the Night Sisters and dark side users like have to sell a part of themselves to become that.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the apathetic Jedi, in a way, sell a part of themselves as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of like how you go wrong. You lose sight of the Force and its will, and you decide that, you know what, it's my will and I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's how you get a Mace Windu like character. I mean, he had to sell part of himself to get there.
Yeah.
Like, do you think Anakin would have fallen if he had told himself that he was allowed to feel the feelings he had?
Well,
Because I've always
That's a hard one.
because I've always, and obviously, like, you can talk about like, oh, he's on this path and it leads to there. But I always saw that one scene where the crisis point, the shatter point of Anakin and Palpatine and Mace Windu, as Anakin has lived his life telling him that he is bad for feeling these things, by this guy who is now doing the exact same things Anakin has wanted to do. And that's when it all shatters for him.
Yeah.
That's when he realizes the lies of the Jedi, It's okay. We could talk about would Anakin have fallen, but that was kind of my point. Was like that you're totally right that like serving the light side also takes something. From you.
So there's a theory going around right now that I think it came up after Ahsoka. Like, we got the whole world between world, and I don't remember who came up with this theory, but it's not mine. That Anakin was never drawn to the dark side. He was drawn to the balance, and that he was punished for that. And so instead of going to the balance, he kind of went a little too far.
Yeah, I will say with Anakin real quick, the selling yourself thing, I'm just going to return back to that for a second. But I think as far as him coming back, Luke is special in that, like, Luke helps him to find and redeem the humanity that he got rid of.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I think, he really does bring balance, is because he truly is redeemed.
Yeah.
He becomes himself again, is kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah. Both recovering parts of him that were both lost to the dark and the light.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
A perfect Jedi would not have saved his son out of love.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
They're not supposed to. Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if the one hurting your son is a Sith Lord, maybe there's an exception to be made there.
But
But you're also not supposed to have a son.
Well, I think I've got one last question for you, Seth.
Yes.
Tuck and I, we talked a little bit about this during our Ahsoka series, but review. Do you think Baylan and Shin are able to stay more in the balance compared to other people that have tasted the dark side because Anakin brought balance to the Force?
That's a really interesting question, and it's kind of been on the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there's a part of me that wants to be like, oh, the dark is like a drug. Once you get that first taste, it, forever will it dominate your destiny. But we have concrete examples of that not happening. Like, the whole point of the movie Return of the Jedi was that Luke was able to resist even though he had the dark in him.
Yeah.
And that fact that he was able to resist is what gave Vader like the idea that maybe he could too. And,
Yeah.
you know, even after all this, he still hasn't fallen. Maybe it's not too late for me. And so like while at one point I want to be like, oh yes, because Yoda said, but like the movies tell a very different story.
Yeah.
That is possible to touch the dark and live through it, you know. There's a part of me that really looking at what is my favorite scene, I know I say that a lot about the sequels.
Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes about the sequels is when Rey first reaches out to the not with her hand but with her mind, and she senses the stuff that's going on the island.
Yeah.
And she talks about there's life, there's death, there's order, there's chaos, there's dark, and there's light, and between it all, a force. Which is just one of the greatest things that has ever been said in a Star Wars movie. We talked about I'm going on this journey of where I think I fall on this topic. I think that I've had my mind changed while we were here.
Yeah. Well, so what are what's your kind of, at least temporary right now, final thoughts on it?
Yeah. So I would say I think that the dark and the light, not necessarily as the characters see them, but as just a general order, chaos, life, death, etc., is intrinsic to the Force. And that the problem isn't the light side or the dark side, it's the light side and the dark side users.
Yeah.
It's not about this side of the Force is good and this side of the Force is bad. It's about the fact that these people have figured out how to manipulate them.
Yeah.
That it's and so that's kind of where I am now. It's like and that's where it's like, okay, I am on Balin's team now. Because his whole thing is that this needs to end.
Yeah.
And that it's that's kind of my thought process now, is that the dark and the light exist whether or not there are Jedi and Sith, right? That's kind of Luke's thing in The Last Jedi, is that Force does not belong to the Jedi.
Right.
And that the Force would have a light and a dark whether or not people could control or feel it. The issue is that when you have somebody who can tap into that, they become extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the Jedi are so like, no, you cannot form attachments.
Yeah. Yeah.
The danger isn't the dark side. The danger is somebody who's able to use it.
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
So that's kind of where I'm thinking now. So in that case, balance might mean no more Force users.
Ooh.
Like true balance.
Yeah. Just letting the Force exist completely on its own.
Yeah. I mean, if I went fully into that camp, that would just mean that all 9 movies are pointless. Right. So obviously, like, there's more to it than that. But that's kind of where my head is right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Well, Tucker, did you have any like final thoughts on everything?
No, I mean, whenever you did yours, I kind of, said pretty much anything I wanted to say then, so
great. Well,
feel pretty good about it. Yeah,
this has been a good talk, boys.
Yeah,
I definitely.
Yeah, and it's. I wish we had an actual resolution, but there's just not one.
Right.
I think that's the secret. Is there's just not one. Yeah.
If you think that Disney is going to resolve the biggest question in their whole movies, in their biggest movie series,
just ain't gonna happen.
They are going to ride that horse until they're beating it just
can.
by standing on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep,
for sure.
Yep, those sweet dollar bills.
Right. Well, of course we can't give a resolution.
Yeah.
If we gave a resolution, we couldn't make movies anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, Seth, did you have any of your stuff that you wanted to like shout out?
Not yet. Maybe soon, coming down the pipeline. But
Yeah, for sure.
I currently do not have anything to refer people to.
Gotcha. That's totally okay. And if you're listening to this far in the future, I'll have Seth send me all of these future projects. I'll link them in the description whenever that time comes.
That, they have to happen first. And
For sure.
There's the rub.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can email us at animalsquadron@gmail.com. Again, that is animalsquadron@gmail.com. We'd really love to hear from you. If you're listening somewhere where you can leave us a review, that would be amazing. It really helps the podcast out. And if you're listening on Spotify, the question of the week will be, what does the balance and the Chosen One prophecy mean to you? For the Animal Squadron, this has been Mother Goose,
Lowtech Tuck,
And Seth.
Goodbye, everybody!
Adios.
See ya.